The pie that people ask for the most is an apple pie. Now, we don't do apple pie the traditional way. We like to do it a little bit differently. So we make an Apple Sage Gouda Pie every fall at Sister Pie. We use local Michigan apples that come from up north. We use a sage sugar, so we blend freshly minced sage with sugar to bring out the flavor and the fragrance. I've seasoned the apples with a little bit of nutmeg, cinnamon, lemon juice, and salt. We add a little bit more sugar in the form of light brown sugar to give a little bit of a caramel element to the final product. And then I like to use tapioca starch for all my fruit pies, so this is what we use to thicken the filling. The tradition of eating apples and cheese together has been around for a very long time. In the New England section of the United States, it's very common to be served a slice of apple pie with a piece of cheddar cheese on top. We took that idea and turned it into a special crust. So we add grated Gouda cheese to the crust, which really complements the herby apple filling. As is tradition with apple pies, this one is a double crusted pie, which means that we won't use a blind bake technique, but we'll roll out the raw dough, fill the crust with the apples, and then top it with lattice strips, crimp it, and bake. Now it's time to make the filling for the Apple Sage Gouda Pie, and then we'll assemble the whole thing. So I have about 2.5 pounds of apples here. I like to use a tart, firm apple so that it retains its shape and has a really nice balance with the sweetness from the sugar. So I've got these apples sliced about 1/2-inch pieces, and I'm gonna pour a little bit of lemon juice on top just so that they don't brown. So I'll mix that up. Okay, set that to the side for a moment while I make the sage sugar. I like to make the sage sugar in advance so that I can really massage the sage and bring out those oils and aromatics. So I've got some sage, place it right in with the sugar, and then I'll just use my fingertips to massage the sage leaves into the sugar. You could also do this in a food processor or a spice grinder if you like. As long as you can smell the sage, you're good to go. Okay, so I'm gonna put the sage sugar in the bowl. I also have some light brown sugar, tapioca starch, a little kosher salt, and then cinnamon and nutmeg. Because what would an apple pie be without those spices? Now I'm just going to mix it all together with my fingers until everything is evenly incorporated. It smells like fall in Detroit. Okay, there's the filling. Now the only thing left is assembling the pie. Okay, now I have my dough and my lattice out of the refrigerator and I'm ready to assemble my Apple Sage Gouda Pie. So the first thing I'm going to do is just take a couple of pinches of what I call crust dust. It's just a mixture of equal parts sugar and flour, and it just helps prevent the bottom of the crust from getting too soggy. It creates a layer of starch that will absorb the liquids that are released from the apples as the pie bakes. So I've got that in there. Now I'm going to layer the apples into the pie, making sure that I press the apples into all of the edges. This will make sure that the pie bakes nice and evenly. So I'm really pressing them down. And I'm being careful not to mound the pie in the center too much. So I want it to kind of be the same height all the way across. Now I'm going to add little bits of butter on top. They will melt as the pie bakes and mix in with the starch to help create a delicious texture. So I'm just dotting the butter all around the apples. Okay. To make the lattice top, I'm going to start with this piece and lay it across the apples. I will lay the next piece like this, and then I will lay the next piece across the one that I just placed down, but going in the opposite direction. Just like that. Now I will lift up this piece and then place it back, lift up this piece, and place it back. Now before I roll up the crust and crimp, I want to trim these edges off so that I'm not rolling up too much dough, which would create a crimp or a crust that's a little too thick and wouldn't bake properly. So we're getting rid of this excess dough. You could just put this excess dough in your pile of scraps to make crackers with. I don't like to waste any ingredients. Now I am going to show you how to roll it up and crimp. So for rolling it up, I am just going to place my thumbs on the edge of the dough. I'm making sure that as I roll, I'm sealing the dough back onto the tin so that it's really secure. I'll go around and press it into the lattice to make sure that it's nice and in place before I crimp. So to crimp, I'm going to use one hand as a C shape, kind of create a C shape, and then the other hand will just use my thumb. They'll meet and create a dramatic crimp like this. You're just pressing against the dough with your fingers. Going all the way around. You'll probably have to press a little bit harder than might feel natural, but that's the way to ensure that after we bake the pie, these crimps stay in their shape. So then I'll go around and make sure there aren't any gaping holes in any of the crimps. If there were, I could patch them up with a little piece of dough or just use my fingers to bring them together. Okay, now I'm ready to egg wash the pie. So this is my egg wash. It's just egg mixed up. I'm gonna egg wash all the crimps first. Now I'll egg wash the lattice. Sometimes it's common to put sugar on top of fruit pies like this. Since this is a little bit sweet and savory, I don't put sugar on top. Okay, now this will go rest in the freezer for about 10 to 15 minutes, just so that it can solidify. Then we'll put it into the oven. The Apple Sage Gouda Pie is out of the oven and needs no additional adornment because look at it, it's beautiful and ready to go. I like to bake this until the crust is golden brown. Then when I turn the temperature down, it bakes until some of the apple juices are bubbling out of the filling. Let it fully cool before serving. After pies come out of the oven, my official recommendation is to always let them cool for 4 to 6 hours before slicing. However, I know that people love eating warm apple pie. So what you could do is let it fully cool, and then before you go to serve it, you could warm it up in the oven a little bit. But at least if you've let it cool after baking, you'll make sure that the juices have solidified and cooled with the starch. It's great to serve it with a little bit of vanilla ice cream, or freshly whipped cream is always classic. If you really want to embrace the cheese in the pie, you could serve it with a little slice of aged Gouda on top.